originally called Cindy Lou regarding Holly's niece. I wonder if that's where Cindy Lou Who came from. Remember in The Grinch? Probably not, but who knows? Cindy Lou Who. Anyway, Holly changed it for his drummer, Jerry Allison, who was dating Peggy Sue Garron. Okay. Down with that. All right. Well, somebody says, Bob, most voters get what they vote for. Just look at Chicago and New York, Lightfoot, then Johnson. And for mayor, now coming up a communist for New York City. It's unreal, isn't it? Tom from Dallas says, remember, Bob, they already took out the no tax on Social Security in the House. By the way, Tom, that was not done intentionally, meaning they weren't trying to blow it off. The rules did not allow it to be part of the package. And you got to follow the rules. And it wasn't a parliamentary issue. It was. It just couldn't be included in a reconciliation bill, meaning no tax on Social Security. I think they're going to get it eventually. I hope and pray before I go on Social Security. But yes, it's getting watered down in the Senate. Like, how much more do you want to spend? How much more? Scary stuff. Well, we got our man Larry from Plymouth. And yes, he's got a theme song. And here he is. Larry, how are you, my man?
Pretty good, Bob.
What do you got?
Okay. I went out and bought my fireworks yesterday.
Oh, great.
I don't understand you hosts on this show, on these shows. You're all against fireworks.
I'm not. I'm not going
to. Bob, the fun is setting them off.
Oh, no, I'm not interested.
That's the
I
fun,
am not
Bob.
interested in being anywhere near setting off fireworks. I'm not.
Bob, I've been doing it since I'm 10 years old.
I'm all for you.
Got all my fingers, got my eyes, everything. I mean, that's the fun part. Who wants to go and sit there and watch somebody else set them off?
I do.
Oh, my God.
Larry, I don't want to see myself, I don't want to play the classical piano. I want to go watch someone who knows what the hell they're doing play the piano.
Well, Bob, I'm saying
I don't.
What they should do, Bob. They should give people a test to see their intelligence. And if they're too stupid, they put a sign in their house, no fireworks, stupid person.
I would actually volunteer for the sign.
Okay.
I would volunteer to sign, and I fully admit I'm too stupid to be near them.
Well, in fact, Bob, I gave two to somebody.
I'm afraid of sparklers.
I gave to somebody 2 years ago. I gave some, and he calls me and says, "Hey, there's something wrong with them fireworks." I said, "What?" I said, "Did you put where it says top? Did you put it up?" He said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Well, what about? Did you put it in the tube? What tube?" Yeah. I said, "The tube I gave you." Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
But Bob, I heard somebody on the radio the other day with Sue Henry, and I'm thinking, man, who's this fairy talking? And here's it turns out to be Brownie from Wilkes-Barre. Mayor Brownie. There's that.
I like Mayor Brown.
Against fireworks, Bob. I thought it was Boy George talking.
I like Brown. I like Mayor Brown.
Bob, for one reason you shouldn't like him, he's a Democrat.
That party is irrelevant to me.
But he's a Democrat. I'm against every Democrat that's alive.
Well, that's a decent policy, but I make exceptions.
Well, I don't know. I've seen very few. I don't know. I really don't know any.
Well, he's one for me.
Well, yeah, you're more lenient than I am. I just when there's a class that I don't like the whole class.
We know that.
But I'm ready.
I wouldn't exactly call
Friday,
myself lenient.
But Bob, Friday during the afternoon, I'll be watching my favorite movie, 1776.
Nice.
I watched that twice.
I love that movie.
Yes, I watch it twice, and then I go out at night.
Sit down, John.
Oh, yeah. I get a kick out of. He says he was John Adams, and talking in Congress about the king and everything, and they said, well, the Parliament didn't do anything to us, and he says, look, he says it's a revolution. Damn it, we got to be mad at somebody. William Daniels, I liked him.
Yeah, William Daniels. He played he was the
he played
sort of the head.
Good,
he was the head surgeon.
I'll be watching that thing. I love it.
Head surgeon or doctor in St. Elsewhere, which I thought was a great medical show.
But Bob, I'm wishing everybody, all the true Americans, I'm wishing a happy 4th of July.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And the ones that aren't Americans, get the hell out of the country.
We would like that. That would make things easier, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Okay, Bob.
Thanks, Larry. Larry, be safe. That's all. If we don't talk to you before, be safe.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I should not be anywhere near where they launch fireworks. I just shouldn't be. And I'm sure there's a few of you like me. We'll be back. Ricardo Jewelers Your Breitling, Oris, Longines, Michelle, Shinola, Luminox, and Swiss Army Watch Store. Tell me it's $9.59. On the nose. My man Mark Mayer sent me, and this is the specific amendment. The Senate rejected a measure to kick illegals off Medicaid. Rhino Susan Collins votes no. It's insane. It's insane. They needed a 60 vote. That was problem number one. They needed 60 votes because of the parliamentarian who we've played information to you all about. And so they only got 56 with one Republican voting with the lunatic Democrats. By the way, day 2 of jury deliberations in the Diddy trial, they're having as much problem with it as I am. I mean, there's a lot of crimes there. Physical abuse, battery. He's a scumbag, but that's not necessarily a crime. But see, what they do is they give you the RICO, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization, so that they can extend the statutes from a couple of years to 10. So they go back to, it was indicted last year, so they go back to 2014 with these things. But I'm sure the jury's, well, it's obvious the jury's having some problems. They're in day 2. It was not a slam dunk. It's a confusing case that they put together. I think that they really tried to manufacture, not the case itself. He's a bad guy. He got away with a lot of crap. But if you get a good jury, which they may have here, if you get a good jury, they're actually going to say, well, okay, you got to prove it. And that may be where we're at now. I don't know if the result may come out, whatever. Bob, the problem with the Democrat Party, they are a victim of their own stupidity. They elevate candidates like Biden and AOC who are as dumb as wood, then elect them, and then blame the Democrats for their failures after they're in office. And the liberal media backs their lies. Unbelievable. You're right. By the way, somebody said, I'm sure that Fireworks Larry is loved by all his neighbors and their pets. I don't have a problem. Look, as long as you're, just don't be Mr. Firework forever. But on, you know what, on the night before and on 4th of July, shoot your fireworks off. And look at Chauncey ain't going to like it. And just the way our house is set up, the basement is no place for him to hide. He's going to have to deal with the fireworks. But I'm like, if they're legitimately, they're set off, but then just don't go the whole weekend and, you know, after midnight and all that kind of stuff. That's the key. And on that note, we take a break for the news with Brian Hughes. Picardo watch time is 10:02 and 30. We'll take this break. We'll be back. And guess what? We got our guy, John Perillo. It's Monday Musings on a Tuesday. We'll return. Great good morning, everyone. Our Ricardo Jewelers, your Breitling watch store time, 10:11. It is Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. This is the Bob Cordaro Show. I am he, and it is a big day to fight for America, defend our values, and with the help of our man, John Basiliga, and his great family of companies, to honor the brave who have made us and kept us free. People like Joseph Justick, Suskin, John Kempka, Wilkes-Barre, Richard Capwell, Dixon City, Robert Polster, South Abington Township, Timothy Boland, late of Doylestown, but he was from Cunningham and born in Dunmore, and James Shellhammer, Mifflinville. So with history, our great founding fathers, and the incomparable Constitution of the United States of America as our guides, let us continue today's battle. Gaveling back to order this meeting of the Club for Common Sense, promising you a sanctuary of sanity for the balance of the morning. Yes, we do. Somebody texts in, Bob, why even be a Republican like Susan Collins if you oppose virtually everything the party represents? Best resign and elect a true common sense Republican. Few would disagree, because she wants to use the Republican Party for what it gives her, but she wants to prove her fake independence. I'll tell you what, I get a real charge out of the Democrats, like the Chuck Schumer. I mean, these people are disgusting a-holes. There's nothing good to be said about them. And they're saying, oh, the Hakeem Jeffries, the cult-like following. The Democrats vote 100% lockstep. And that's why I tell you, a couple of Republicans disagreeing here and there on this or that, fine. Not in this case, by the way, because it's now your back's against the wall. But the Democrats vote lockstep on everything. That's the cult. Always remember, what they're calling you is what they are. Our guy Hooks Patterson, 9 principles of propaganda. Lie big, focus, repeat, blame, provoke, create crisis, use emotion, pander, and no limits. Nuts. Well, it's Tuesday, but guess what? It's time for Monday Musings with John Perillo. John, how are you, my man?
I'm good, Bob. Thank you for adjusting your schedule. I appreciate it.
Believe me, for you, we would do anything necessary.
You're kind. Thank you. Hey, for your listeners, I wanted to look at the mayoral election in New York. And yes, I know the show is in PA, but for this nice
this
audience,
means a lot. This has national implications. It has future implications. It's indicative of where the Democrat Party is today. That's why I was all over. We had Bo Dietl on last week talking about it. And here's a lifelong New Yorker. He's actually scared.
Well, it is interesting, and then again, as Bob says, it's not just about New York, and and Bob says the audience is getting more and more nationwide, so that matters too. And I know Bob talked about it, but just a real quick summary in case you don't know. In the Democratic primary, New York City elected an openly anti-Semitic, self-proclaimed socialist in the financial capital of the world, by the way,
Yep. Yeah.
whose policies, to the extent that we can believe that he really believes in himself, are either absurd or just plain nuts. And in New York, the Democratic candidate gets elected to mayor. So, barring some kind of divine intervention, it certainly looks like the next mayor of New York is going to be this guy, Zohran Mamdani. And, even though nobody's hearing this piece will be affected by that election directly, it's still important because it's important to understand how and why people do what they do. And we need to do that because that part does affect our world. And yeah, so by the way, the political world is absolutely in turmoil. And it's not just here in the U.S., by the way. Just a quick side note. In the U.K., the Reform Party beat out both the Tories and the Labour in a recent poll. And that would be like the U.S. Independent Party beating out both the Republicans and the Democrats. So there's this big upheaval in global political philosophy, and this election is an example of that. So it's absolutely worth taking a look because, as Bob says, it's coming to a theater near you, right?
Well, John Perillo, remember this. In Great Britain, it's a drive to common sense. You had feckless Tories. You have insane Laborites. And the Reform Party with Nigel Farage is the only one that makes any sense and that actually cares about Britain. They're basically like the Donald Trump of Britain.
Well, they're the only ones listening to the voters, which I think is another key thing out there. But back to us here in the U.S., right? So Mr. Mamdani was running against a bunch of old political hacks, and notably Mario Cuomo, whose family once owned New York, by the way. And Mamdani, effectively used social media, especially TikTok, to promote his campaign. And his supporters should get points for just plain working hard. His volunteers, knocked on over 1 million doors during the campaign, all over the city, and that still matters. And Mr. Mamdani changed his name back from Young Cardamon, by the way, which would have been more acceptable back when I lived on the East Coast. But Zoran Mamdani, even with him chanting from the river to the sea with protesters in New York, hardly raises an eyebrow anymore in a city that's 11% Jewish, by the way.
Yeah.
And so while it's easy to dismiss a guy like him, it's important to point out that he raised so much money in his campaign that his campaign actually donated to other races because he had more than he needed. And as Bob
he also got, by the
guy,
way, insanely, 20% of the Jewish vote.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother discussion, right? And I will reach out to my Jewish friends and see if I can get some answers on that. And as Bob has mentioned, this guy, he is an open socialist. He doesn't shy away from the label.
He's a communist.
So much so. Yes, and he's so much so that he wants government control of grocery stores, rent freezes, and as the economically illiterate as that is, he got almost as many votes as the entire Democratic mayoral primary field in 2017. So he's not really a fringe guy. Right. And so, again, why do people vote for him in such large numbers? There was an article by a guy named Raheem Salim in the Free Press that probably had the best explanation I could find. So I wanted to use that as a jumping off point, to dig in here a bit and see what we can find out, if we can put together, what's really going on behind the success. And Mr. Salim uses a phrase that I really like, something he calls elite overproduction. And that phrase actually comes from a different social scientist, a guy named Peter Turchin, who said that societies have problems when the number of elites produced exceeds the number of available elite positions. And in his words, there are only so many tenured professors at Yale University, no matter how many elites you churn out in today's universities. There's only so many positions, right? Or the way I'd like to put it is we need plumbers and electricians more than we need fringe experts on ideologies or even stand-up philosophers like myself. And instead, we're churning out thousands of over-credentialed college graduates with hundreds of thousands in student loan debt with zero job prospects in their fields because those fields have no practical application. And that group of highly educated mid-20s to young 30s person overwhelmingly lives in cities like New York, and they're spending over 30% of their income on rent or with roommates into their 40s because that's what it takes to live in New York. And that bunch overwhelmingly supported Mamdani and his rent control ideas, right? And in our tribalism discussions, we discussed kind of the red-blue county voting map of the U.S. Well, you can do that almost to a street level if you want to. And The Economist magazine actually did that for this election. And Mamdani did best in neighborhoods where the income was between $75,000 and $200,000, which sounds like a lot, but it's not in New York. And Cuomo beat him in the lower-income neighborhoods. And that sounds about right because the poorest in New York already live in rent-controlled apartments, but those in the middle who make too much for subsidized public housing but can't afford a house or a condo, they fall into that group that overwhelmingly voted for Mr. Mamdani. And these overproduced elites don't have city jobs with pensions, so they're stuck living in conditions that their elite status, if you will, makes them feel is too low for them, and there's no way out for them. And yes, they made a lot of decisions that got them into that situation. I'm not arguing that at all. But the fact is that there are a lot of them, and they all vote. And the other issue is that Mario Cuomo was probably seen as part of the old.
Andrew, yeah.
I'm sorry.
And by the way, I want to point out his father lost for mayor.
Yes,
Just
yes.
so you know.
That's why I say that was a Freudian slip because that's how old I am. But Andrew Cuomo was probably seen as part of the old dying Democratic Party. And no matter what your political affiliation is, it's a good idea to try to understand those with whom you disagree. So the Democratic Party wants someone, anyone, to take on the Trump administration. And Andrew Cuomo is 67, and he was likely seen as part of the same school of politicians that Biden came from. Right?
Plus, he might have killed.
Kind of
He might have killed your grandparent in a nursing home.
Okay, well, there's that, right?
Let's not overlook that. Hey, John, we've got to take a break.
Yes.
We got to hear from our great sponsors, a little history, a little music. Then we'll come back with the conclusion of our Monday musings on a Tuesday with our man, John Perillo. We'll be back. This is AOC's theme song because that's what's blowing inside her brain, her skull. The Association, Murph says, this day, 1967, they moved up to number 1 with that song, Windy. And 1963, that's when 5-digit zip codes were launched by the U.S. Postal Service. And it's been downhill ever since. Hasn't it? Oh, Bacardo's watch time. Bacardo's Jewelers watch time, 10:26. You got to stop in Bacardo's. I'm telling you. The watch selection is amazing. That's why they are our official timekeeper here on the program. Somebody said, texting in, Bob, you hit the nail on the head. Republicans will debate back and forth with one another if they have a disagreement. That's perfectly okay. Everybody moves on. But if you're a Democrat, you absolutely positively must vote 100% in line with all the other Democrats. Otherwise, you're being pushed out of the party and labeled as a bigot or a homophobe or a lunatic. Here's the proof in that pudding. Connor Lamb, a former moderate, and if you're watching us on live stream, I'm doing the air quotes, Democrat, who won a congressional seat in a special election years ago, is now going hardcore lunatic left in order to become the United States Senator. Fetterman beat him in the primary, if you recall. And Fetterman has not voted against the Democrat Party. He's only made some rational statements regarding the border in Israel. And he is in the crosshairs. So you're 1,000% on. Yeah. Someone says, Bob, if you ever saw Breaking Bad, that Windy song will never be the same. I did, but you know where I watched it? I watched it in the hole of Canaan Penitentiary. And so what I had to do is I had to stack up chairs so that I could sit and look out the slit of a window that you had. And I'm in there freezing, by the way, because it was in the 50s, the way they refrigerate the cells. And I had to watch, but I didn't have the sound. I just had to read the, fortunately, I had the, what you call it? What do they call that? The sub, whatever. They had the words on the screen. And the only reason I got to watch this Breaking Bad marathon was because the toilet had overflowed in another one of my cells, and they'd left me for about 8 hours in the midst of the sewage on the floor, and then finally let me out and put me in another cell, and I got to watch Breaking Bad. So, no, I'll have to watch it with sound someday. John Perillo's with us, Monday Musings. John, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, it was interesting that Bob just as he was wrapping up before mentioned AOC, and I was talking about how Mamdani, one of the people he ran against was Cuomo, and Cuomo had been governor of the state, and just like the rest of the U.S., the rural parts of New York are much more conservative than are the cities. So Cuomo had to work with them as governor, which angered some progressives. And so, Cuomo's campaign in New York City was around the fact that Mamdani is young and unserious in a party that now actually seems to want that in their candidates.
Yes, they want to be unserious.
Well, and I don't mean to make that, to make light of that. I mean,
no, it's true. Like they want to be unserious. Yeah. They want to be irrational. They truly want to be. And Bob had mentioned AOC, who's both young, brash, and I guess we would call it intellectually challenged. In that kind of doesn't seem to have that understanding of how the world runs. But anyway, Mamdani also ran a very simple campaign, a populist campaign. He ran on affordability, rent control, free buses, free childcare, and all promising that would be paid for only by millionaires and billionaires. And for the purpose of this piece, it doesn't really matter if those things are impossible or not. It matters that they are clear, simple, and easy for voters to get behind. And by the way, John, they're not even within his jurisdiction.
Right.
People don't understand New York City. The state runs much of New York City because of the takeover when Mayor Beam ran them into the shoals of bankruptcy back in the 70s.
Exactly. Exactly. Only the governor can do those things. And as my sister reminds me, my father used to say something along the lines of, "It's easier to say quote free stuff than it is to remind or to explain to voters why rent control actually hurts renters." But the one thing that was absolutely incomprehensible to me is how a city with an 11% Jewish population voted for a guy that has a deep and long-standing history of anti-Israel activism. And it's not just his name. He founded a Justice for Palestine Center in his college, denounced Israel as an apartheid state, participated in anti-Israeli marches. Cuomo made this appeal to Jewish voters, but I don't have any data on how Jewish voters voted yet. But Mamdani was openly anti-Jewish, and you've heard me say it before.
Well, what we saw, though, John, is 80%. Well, there was other fringe voters, but 80% voted against him, but 20% voted for him, Jewish.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
It's an odd thing for me to see that, right? And so again, these are things that as non-New Yorkers we should still be looking at because they're important, right? And partly what I think this means is that anti-Semitism is more acceptable in our country, certainly among elites. And there's this demographic change in New York as well. The new immigrants to New York don't see the same danger in anti-Semitism than did their predecessors. And one of the things you'll hear on conservative talk in general is that we conservatives can get all smug about being able to run against him in future elections because I think he represents some of the new Democratic Party, and that should be beatable in the national ticket. But I'm originally from Long Island, believe it or not, and I can't help but feel badly for the residents there. When I was growing up, my father tried, unsuccessfully I might add, to raise me with culture. So he would take us to New York to the museums and things like that. And New York at the time was dirty and dangerous. And then it got cleaned up, and it was really something of a joy. And I'm not a city person, but I will tell you that a fresh hot pretzel on the street or a slice of real pizza or wandering through the Museum of Natural History or down Fifth Avenue watching Christmas shoppers, because we certainly couldn't shop on Fifth Avenue, or any of those other things, in New York is an experience like nothing else. And the idea that an openly anti-Semite socialist was elected to run for mayor, will likely become mayor because of the way that system works, is something for us, all of us, to think about who don't live there, right? And as Bob has said many times, we need a vibrant opposition party in the Democrats. We need a competing set of ideas because reasoned debate improves the country. But rent control, government ownership of stores, anti-Semitism doesn't represent the kind of opposition.
Anti-capitalism. Pure insanity.
Right?
Pure insanity owning the Democrat Party is only hurting the country.
Right. And I just want to close with a quote.
Quickly,
that
yeah.
This whole thing brings to mind a guy named H.L. Mencken that says, quote, "Democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard." And, so for the people in, New York, I wish you the best, but you're going to get it good and hard if you're not careful. And we need to, as voters and as people who care about our country, we need to start thinking about the implications of some of these philosophies that are out there and need to understand them and to be articulate about why we agree or disagree.
Well, John Perillo, always a pleasure. Thank you, my friend. And I will be talking about it again and again and again because this guy, he is, in terms of left-wing lunacy, he's the gift that keeps on giving.
And thank you again, Bob, to you and your listeners for spending time with me on Tuesday. Sorry for the change in schedule. I hope you guys have a great week.
All right. John Perillo, Monday Musings on a Tuesday. We'll be back. Our veterans this hour and every hour, this day and every day, brought to you by our man John Basiliga. And let's talk about two of his great companies. Eastern Roofing Systems, one of the biggest and the premier commercial industrial roofing contractors in the eastern United States. And they will bring that expertise to your house right here in Northeast Pennsylvania. Eastern Roofing Systems. Serenity Care, the gold standard in senior care in Northeast Pennsylvania. 4 locations: Mid-Valley, Old Forge, Wyoming, Kingston. Personal care services, dementia care services at Mid-Valley and Kingston locations. Totally redone. Check them out. Good food, clean, bright, the gold standard. Serenity Care. Richard Capwell. He was from Dixon City. We lost him April 11th. Beloved father and proud Army veteran. He died at age 76 April 11th. Born in Scranton. He served this country with honor and dedication in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. He worked for over 30 years as a splicing technician for Verizon. Loving father and grandfather. Member of the American Legion Post Dixon City. He was a commander and held other offices there. Also, the VFW Post. He was commander of Dixon City Veterans Honor Guard for 16 years. Always going above and beyond for veterans. Surviving his son, his daughter, 6 grandchildren, a great-grandson, and as a companion of 11 years, Dolores. Richard Capwell. Robert Polster. He was 81 when we lost him May 30th. He was from South Abington Township. His wife of 53 years, the former Patricia Walsh, born in Scranton. He was a U.S. Army veteran, serving us in the U.S. Army Reserve Corps. Prior to retirement, he was employed by Harrison House of Scranton. In addition to his wife, 5 children, 4 grandchildren, and many other family members. Robert Polster. Our great veterans this hour, brought to you by John Basiliga, Eastern Roofing Systems, and Serenity Care. Storm Tracker 16 forecast from meteorologist Joe Snedeker. Today, partly sunny and muggy with a chance of thunderstorms, 83. Tonight, partly cloudy, low 65. Wednesday, partly sunny and less humid, 85. Thursday, partly cloudy with a chance of showers and thunderstorms, 85. Yeah, except the Democrats. They want the government to run the show. I don't get it. This date, 1968, the Rascals. Murph says they released their hit, People Gotta Be Free. I love the horns in that song. Well, it's Tuesday. Well, what do we do on Tuesdays? Well, when we can, we check in with our girl, Rebecca Martino, up at Stately Pet Supply on State Street in Clark Summit to see what the deal is with our pets. And here she is, Rebecca Martino. How are you, dear? Are you there, Rebecca? Did I press the right button?
No, you did. You did. I was on mute because I'm fumbling around washing dishes, so I had it on mute in case you picked up while I was.
That's okay. We can listen to dish. I'm an old professional dishwasher. I could listen to dishes being washed all day.
So how's everybody doing today?
Everybody's great.
Chauncey.
Chauncey's
Okay, good.
He's a superstar. He's a superstar
Really,
in the making.
that's what I was asking.
He's a
Really,
superstar
that's
in the making. He's a rookie of the year, but a superstar in the making, we believe.
Well, I think I tell you this every time you come in. The store is kind of a sensory overload. It smells like beef jerky and other dogs and all that stuff. It's sensory overload. And every time I've seen Chauncey, it really is kind of a window to me because I see a lot of dogs come in the store. And some are pretty spastic, some are very timid, some are scared. And Chauncey just seems so mellow, calm, and inquisitive and confident. He's really, really a great dog. He really is, which is good because he's probably going to be pretty big by the time he's done growing. So it's
well,
good for you that he'll always be under control.
He just started. This is an interesting question maybe for you, but at least something for you to comment on. He just started at about 4.5 months. He's a little over 5 now months. He just started protecting the house.
Okay,
he'll bark.
That's part of his breed.
Yeah,
yeah. His ancestors are speaking to him, right? There's really a beauty in the purpose and the genetic sculpting of these purebreds over the years, whether they're hunting dogs or protection or whatever their purpose was. That's always going to be his impulse, and you've done a great job. Of course, from what I can see in the store, he's just so willing to listen to you. So he's always going to look like you'll have him under control, which is, it's excellent. And you'll never have to worry about anyone breaking into your house because a bark like his, I can imagine, is pretty intimidating. So good for you guys.
I can say firsthand, his bark is not worse than his bite. His bite.
No,
I got scratches on my face to prove it.
I love it when they're just 150-pound knuckleheads that, but he's a great dog. So quick couple tips for this week for Chauncey, because I know he had
fireworks is a big deal. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So 2 quick things. Couple tips, and then I have an announcement. The tips pertain to fireworks and loud noises. I know your dogs out there can seem maybe used to them, or maybe it's kind of under control, but I just want to reinforce to anybody, today is the day to make sure your dog's collar has a tag with your phone number on it. Every 4th of July and fireworks season, without fail, you'll see a social media post of a lost dog. And, watch that you're not tying them out on a tie in the leash and you think, oh, they're fine. The collar is tied up. He's fine. Dogs are little Houdinis, and they can slip out of their collars. The collar with their ID is left on the leash, and your dog's gone. So, and you see a lot of dogs that are very friendly, but once they're loose and scared, they become pretty timid, and they don't always come to you when you call to them. So just check your dog has an ID tag. Keep them inside. I love fireworks, but just dogs don't. So, this is the day to make sure there's an ID tag. We have calming treats at the store. Your vet can probably give you some pharmaceutical-grade calming treats or calming pills, things like that. But you'll get through it. But one of the best ways to protect them is make sure your fences don't have gaps in them. Don't be one of the people on social media where your dog is lost.
All right, what do we do about the raw noise? I was pointing out I don't have a place. The way my house is laid out, there's not really a place that won't, where you could be hidden in a basement or the sound is going to get there.
Yeah. No, there's not really a way. Even if you soundproof it, their ears are so good, they're probably going to get something. And there's a percussion to it too, right?
Yeah.
Your dog's going to be able to feel it. So it white noise, come for your dog. Make it. You can distract. You can redirect. Just like where dogs can be obsessive about something they're very interested in, even if they're trembling and really turning in on themselves with fear. Break that cycle. Bring out some treats. Play sit. Play different things and distract your dog and show them that fun can be had even while the scary noise is coming, is around, and it's okay. You don't have to let them obsess and just sit in a corner and kind of cycle and hamster wheel through that fear. Break it around, break it up, and white noise, fans, TV, things like that.
Well, I'll throw Ponth.
If that makes sense.
I'll throw Ponth the cat in front of him, and then that's always his number one obsession.
Yeah, laser pointer play for everybody in the Cordaro household this weekend.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. We appreciate it always. Yeah, I'm happy
Sure.
you reminded us.
One quick announcement.
Go ahead. Fire away.
Oh no, we have a big sale this weekend. It's an Independence Day sale. I'd like, and a lot of brands are helping us forward this sale. We're going to take 20% off everything in the entire store, everything except Seresto collars. But food, frozen raw, big bags of dog food, treats, toys, collars, leashes, beds, everything in the store is 20% off on the 5th and the 6th. And even if we don't have what you need that day, if it's a regularly, carried item
so
by
you're
us,
open Sunday.
we'll offer you a rain check. We are. We're open Sundays. Monday is the only day we're closed.
Okay. As Johnny Carson would say, I did not know that.
Oh, good. I'm glad we checked that box again today.
Yes. All right. Well,
so
big sale Saturday, Sunday. I like it. I might buy an extra bag of the Chauncey's dog food. And
included.
And Ponth. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not?
All right.
That's what it's for, just to help make a dent for everybody.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for the sale, number one. But number two, thanks for the tip on just distract your pets if you can and make sure they can't get away. Yeah.
That's right.
2 good tips for the 4th. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bob.
Always
and have a good 4th.
Rebecca Martino, Stately Pet Supply, State Street, Clark Summit. We'll be back. It's time for the Bloomberg Money Minute. And then we got some calls to get to. We'll do all of that. By the way, a bunch of you text in, thank you. Closed caption. I couldn't figure out what the hell it was when I'm watching from my cell in isolation. And Jim Croce, Murph says this date, 1972, he debuted. I didn't know it was his first single. What a great start. You don't mess around with Jim. And the great DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, established this date, 1973. You want to talk about brave cowboys, talk about your DEA agents. They're going into situations they go into. It's just incredible. Oh, gosh. And I was with a lot of the drug dealers that would want to do the DEA agents harm. Yeah. It's not a job for the faint of heart. We'll put it that way. All right, let's go to right before the top of the hour. Joe from Berwick. He's been patient. Joe, how are you?
Hello, Bob. Thank you for having me on. Hey, so just something interesting to report. I saw something this morning I never thought I'd see. Local tire shop here that sells discount tires. And it's a dirty job, right? And first time ever I pull in, I see a woman working there. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised with how many non-working sissy men you have in this society anymore. Maybe the women will step up and save us, you know?
I'm a Coast Tire guy now. But years ago, I represented them, was friends with them, played football with Mike. I used to go to Sandone Tire all the time. And they had a girl there. I blank on everything, but I'm blanking on her. She was the best. She was one of the best people there. So that you're talking 70s, 80s. So it's not unprecedented. We'll put it that way.
No, it's not.
And good for her.
But hey, Bob, the reason I called is about, okay, so this bill that's getting stalled in the Senate. Now, here's what's absurd about this. And I don't even know how you explain it to these Republicans. When they talk about the deficit, right? And they say, oh, it is going to add to the deficit. Well, here's what that idea is based off of. That's based on the idea that government will keep spending the way that it is without changes.
Well, it's also a static view of the economy, which is never true. Which, by the way, I'm not saying they're out trying to plot against us. They can only look at, all right, if we reduce a tax rate, this much less will come in. They can't plug in the growth that comes with it, because I go back to John F. Kennedy's tax cuts, income tax cuts. Every income tax cut we've ever had, revenue has increased to the federal government. That's the fact. That's the truth.
It has. But I don't even want to make that argument just because that's too much for some people to grasp the way they're carrying on about this. What's absurd is, here's the deal. Nothing will ever change in government until government changes the way it does business. And Trump has two very important provisions in here that they're missing. One is taking illegal aliens off of Medicare, a huge deal.
Yeah, because that woman, they moved the parliamentarian, shut it out and said it had to be a 60 votes, and they only got 56. Yeah. Yep, insanity.
Yeah, but even so, it was still the idea that Republicans were gun shy, and they're hearing all it, and they became weak-kneed. But there's that, and then there's also that provision in there saying we aren't going to pay for the sex change operations anymore, which is huge because that is so costly and expensive, and yet it's unnecessary, and it's costing a lot of money. So hearing them talk and hearing how ignorant they are, saying this is adding to the deficit, no, it's not. If you would actually do the changes, it would not add to the deficit, and it's not a hard argument to understand. But
because history tells us it's true, Joe. History tells us you reduce tax rates, people make more money, and the government gets more money. Period. Pleasure, Joe.
Sure.
Joe, always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
We got to go, my man, because
Bob.
it's after 11, but always a pleasure. Thank you. We've got to take this break. Bob Cordaro, WILK. We're going to talk about the Battle of Wyoming and some other Revolutionary War things. We've got David DeCosmo coming on, and we're going to talk about all of that after the news. It's the Bob Cordaro Show. Our Bacardo Jewelers watch time is 11:02. Great good morning, everyone. Bacardo Jewelers, your Breitling, Oris, Longines, Michelle, Shinola, Luminox, and Swiss Army Watch Store. Tells you the time is 11:10 a.m. here in the great Northeast. This beautiful July 1st, the beginning of the month, 2025. This is the Bob Cordaro Show. I am he. And it's a big day to fight for America, defend our values, and with the help of our man John Basiliga and his great companies like Eastern Roofing Systems and Serenity Care, to honor the brave who have made us and kept us free. People like veterans we lost this year, but celebrate today thanks to John. Robert Polster, South Abington Township. Richard Capwell, Dixon City. Joseph Justick, Suskin. John Kempka, Wilkes-Barre. Timothy Boland, late of Doylestown, but he was from Cunningham, born in Dunmore. And James Shellhammer, Mifflinville. So in history, our great founding fathers and the incomparable Constitution of the United States of America as our guides. Let us continue today's battle. Gaveling back to order this meeting of the Club for Common Sense, promising you that via our commitment to common sense, we will provide you a sanctuary of sanity in a world where, I don't know, 20% of the world's gone insane and there's a bunch of people trying to follow them. Well, one of the things we love to do here, we love to talk about our history. And I went through the litany of events that are happening regarding the Battle of Wyoming and our Revolutionary War history here. And in a moment, we're going to have David DeCosmo, our local historian for this program, and Bill Lewis to talk about these events and a little bit about the history. I want to get to Mother Teresa, St. Teresa, for today, though, July 1st. She says, everybody today seems to be in a hurry. No one has any time to give to others. Children to their parents, parents to their children, spouses to each other. Well, that is certainly a malady, and it's why every Friday we read Tomorrow Never Comes. Just to remind you guys, it's and me, I'm reminding myself. Spend time with loved ones. Reach out to people that maybe you had a problem with, all that. And believe me, it'll be worth your time, and it might change somebody's life. All right, so David DeCosmo, he's got his own theme song. That's how often we're lucky to have him on. David, why don't you introduce Bill Lewis for us? Because these events they're almost little known even in our own area.
Yes, and that's so ironic, Bob, because on July 3rd marks the 247th anniversary of this you can call it a battle, but most people know it as the Wyoming Massacre. And it reminds us that a lot of American history is based right here in our own area. As a matter of fact, at least one historian called the Battle of Wyoming the Revolutionary War Pearl Harbor. That's how important it was, and the kind of aftermath that it left. And as we remember it, we want to remember when we think of the Revolutionary War, we think of Americans, we are now Americans, fighting the British, and that was certainly true. But we had two other enemies. We had the Loyalists, people who lived here but were still committed to the crown in England, and we had the Native Americans, in our case, Iroquois Indians, who were fighting on the side of the British. Comes July 3rd, 1778, and those groups clashed. Now, I love to talk about it, but the fact of the matter is that you've got a local expert on this battle, and that's Dr. Bill Lewis, who was a past president of the Luzerne County Historical Society, and he was involved, of course, and still is involved in the State Historical and Museum Commission. And Bill is always at the annual celebration, or remembrance is a more appropriate term, of the Battle of Wyoming. So, Bill, if you're on the line, I wonder if you'd kind of chime in and give us the basic who, what, where, and why of that battle.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Good morning. So the reason the Battle of Wyoming occurred, and it was really a battle between very young men and older people who were left in the valley, the men. A lot of the age-appropriate men had already joined Washington's army, and they had left the valley, and they left their wives, their children, and the older folks back here in the community. And so what happened is that there was a change in British strategy in 1778, except for the large cities like New York and Philadelphia and places like that. The British basically had decided the more valuable part of the country to retain was the South, because many of the places down there had 2 or 3 even growing seasons. And what was the value of America? It was our agriculture at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So the British troops, by and large, except for occupying the major cities, had moved to the southern United States, and so consequently had George Washington and his army. However, if you left the North exposed, they could really kind of take over. The colonists could take over up here. So what they basically did was they got the Tories, or the Loyalists, as David has said, together with their Native American allies, to engage in a series of attacks that was really terrorism, to be frank with you. Yeah. It was terroristic attacks on communities, and one of the first places they came was to northeastern Pennsylvania. They came down along the Susquehanna River. They had engaged with some folks in Harding, killed some people there. They had burned Pittston Fort, and they had burned Jenkins Fort. And they also encountered a fort in what is today Exeter, and it was actually occupied by Loyalists. And so when Captain Butler and his crew came down with the Tories and Native Americans, they were greeted by these folks, and they said, "Wow, great to meet you, but we got to burn your little palisaded fort down here because we don't want people to be suspicious of you." So they burned that down. And the next day they met on the battlefield of what is now Exeter Borough and fought for maybe 42 minutes to an hour. It was a major thumping. The Native Americans had hidden in the swamp on the backside of Exeter, and at the very vital moment they came out and attacked the colonial fighters. Most of the people tried to escape, and the real theme of the battle was the aftermath, where they burned people at the stake. Of course, the Indian woman by the supposed name of Queen Esther, but there's a huge controversy that she may never have even been near the area. But some Native American woman lined everybody up around this rock and killed 19 people by smashing their heads in as she sang and danced. So she was pretty excited about the whole thing as it occurred.
How many? What size, Bill? What size were the forces? Arrayed against each other, roughly, Bill Lewis?
Yeah, there is no true accurate number. We do know the Native Americans and the Tories were about double the number of people, and strategically, they really had the advantage because our guys left the fort at 40 Fort, marched north. By the time they got up to Exeter, they were starting to get tired, but they did engage with the Tories directly in the traditional battlefield. But they didn't know that to their left, again, if anybody's familiar with Exeter, if you go onto a side street heading towards the mountain, you go over a little hump, and where railroad tracks are today. But then you come down to a lower section. Well, that was pure swamp in those years. Yeah. And that's where the Native Americans were hiring, and that's when they circled around.
Bill Lewis, was it fully wooded, this area where they marched with just, wagon trails, essentially?
There was the Great Highway, which we now call Wyoming Avenue. But other than that, it was heavily wooded. There was some growing fields along the way because both the colonists as well as the Native Americans, this valley, the value of it was the fact that we had these huge, great growing fields right next to the river. So they took advantage of that. And but it was, there was very little development in northeastern Pennsylvania at that time. The only true development really was in what now is downtown Wilkes-Barre, where most everybody was along South River Street. Yeah. There was a fort on Public Square. There were a couple other forts, and of course there was the fort in 40 Fort. Bill, other than that, it was some growing fields, and yeah.
If I may interject 1 second, everybody sees the giant monument there in Wyoming, and that's where the annual ceremony is held. 2 questions. First of all, are the remains of the victims, for the most part, still buried there? Are they buried there? And the other was more of an observation than a question, but that rock you mentioned where survivors were prisoners were brutally murdered, that's still there, is it not? Very close by?
Yes. So Queen Esther's Rock, as it's known, is on Susquehanna Street in Wyoming. Wow. One of the things that happened in the 1800s is that when people visited the Wyoming Valley, you would visit Queen Esther's Rock because its fame was that amazing. But with any kind of tourism, you get people chipping off pieces of the rock. So what is left is now guarded by a metal grate, but it's probably a quarter or even 10% of the size of the original rock because, we had souvenir hunters even back in those days.
How about that?
And the monument, so the battle was so brutal that almost everybody left the valley, except for some folks who lived in what's now Wilkes-Barre. Most everybody had left the valley. They came back in late October of 1778 to recover the bones, which had dried out, and they were really just bones. They buried them in a mass grave in what is now Exeter. In the 1830s, there was a bet between 2 local political groups who could find the bones, and the one group led by William Swetland, their guys found them in 2 hours. And in a 4th of July ceremony in 1832, they had ministers, they had speeches, they had a picnic afterwards, but they had people in the pit taking the bones out, collecting them, putting them in cardboard boxes. If they were really interesting, if they had a bullet or a tomahawk mark on it, they were passed around the crowd, pretty gruesome. And they were eventually put in boxes and taken to what is William Swetland's store, which is still there today on the riverside. Most of the building is still there. Yeah. And about a year or 2 later, they were taken, and the monument was not even really started other than a crypt, which is underneath, and the boxes were interred in a crypt under that monument. And then it took them close to 30 years to build the monument.
Bill Lewis, a Big Cat texted into me. He said, the state of Wyoming, and tell me if this is accurate, the state of Wyoming was named after the Battle of Wyoming to commemorate it.
It was. How
about that? I never knew that.
When you read the congressional proceedings naming the state, they talk about the heroism at Wyoming, all this sort of thing. Wyoming, unfortunately, really doesn't acknowledge that anymore on their public websites and things like that. But that's absolutely where the name came from.
How about that?
And it's Native American for a Great Plain.
Yeah. I always say that Luzerne is French for Land of Many Chiefs, and Lackawanna is Indian for Land of Many Chiefs. That's not accurate, though, is it?
Well, Luzerne County is named after the Chevalier de Luzerne, who was the French ambassador to the colonies who was so supportive and eventually brought the French military to bear against the British and help us in the Revolution. So, yeah, but, whether it's accurate in reality or accurate in origin, that can be argued.
It's a Monsignor McGowan joke, if you remember him.
Right. Yeah, I surely do.
All right, so there's a number of events that are occurring.
Yes.
Tell us about those.
Our event is at 10 o'clock Friday morning, the 4th of July at the Monument. That's the first event. We have a half-hour band concert. We have speakers, floral tributes. We have Rev War reenactors who fire a volley. It's just a very traditional, historic 4th of July ceremony. It's a terrific ceremony.
Where is that on Wyoming Avenue? A lot of people are asking me.
Right on the corner of Monument Street and Wyoming Avenue in Wyoming. It's before you get to the town center if you're headed north on Route 11, and it's really the only stone obelisk on Wyoming Avenue, so it's pretty easy to find.
What's the block number?
I'm not even sure. Yeah, it's.
But that monument
just past the Wyoming Shopping Center.
Okay, and the Monument Ave is the intersection.
That's the intersection,
okay.
Monument Avenue and Wyoming Avenue, yeah. And then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the Dennison home, remember Colonel Dennison was the second in command at the Battle of Wyoming, and the guy who actually signed the surrender. They will actually do a reenactment of the capitulation to Captain Butler of the Tories, and they have the actual table that they bring out that the capitulation was signed on July the 4th of 1778. So that's a really cool. They'll all be dressed up.
Remember, Bob, and of course, as Bill will attest, this was a major loss, Bob, but it led to a tremendous set of victories, which included basically the annihilation of the Native Americans in the area.
Yeah, the next one after this, the next terrorist attack was on Cherry Valley in New York, and George Washington was so furious, he sent General Sullivan's up here, and they formed Sullivan's March, and they basically, as David said, went up along the Susquehanna Valley and rooted out any Native Americans who were still living there. So, brutal ending. But that was basically the end of most of the major Native American power in this part of the country. Yeah. They all fled over into Canada and into Fort Niagara, places like that.
Dr. Lewis, could you repeat those two events for us once again, time and place?
Yeah. Friday morning, 10 o'clock at the Wyoming Monument, and then at 1 o'clock at the Dennison home, which is also off of Wyoming Avenue, on Dennison Street in 40 Fort. It is the original home of Colonel Dennison, who was one of the leaders in the Battle of Wyoming, and that's at 1 o'clock, the capitulation ceremony.
I could picture all of these things as they were. Fascinating.
Yeah, well, they all thought I covered them.
Yep. You did have a camera crew there, didn't you, David?
Absolutely. Well, it was a sketch artist.
Gentlemen, just so you know, I tell the jokes around here, okay? Let's keep it that way.
Sorry about that, yeah.
Well, Bill Lewis, thank you very much. David DeCosmo, thank you very much. Big, important history. I mean, this is true roots of the Wyoming Valley right there. So I appreciate it from both of you, your time, your efforts, and Friday's a big day at 10 and then at 1 to commemorate all of this.
Glad to be on, Bob, and I hope all your news is good.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We'll take a break. Bob Cordaro, WILK. We have to do a double bubble. That's what we call them here. And we'll come back with our Veterans Tribute, the weather, and more of your calls. 570-883-0098. Picardo Watch Time, 11:30. Our veterans this hour and every hour, this day and every day, brought to you by our man John Basiliga and two of his great companies. By the way, a Terra 519's open tonight. So is the rest of the lineup on Basiliga Hospitality. But special mention of Eastern Roofing Systems, one of the largest industrial commercial roofers in the Eastern Seaboard and the best. And they'll bring that expertise to your house. You give them a call, Eastern Roofing Systems, based in Jessup. Serenity Care, the gold standard of senior care in Northeast Pennsylvania, with 4 locations, Mid-Valley, Old Forge, Wyoming, and Kingston. Dementia care units at their Mid-Valley and Kingston properties. Totally redone. I'm telling you, gold standard. Serenity Care. James Shellhammer, retired U.S. Navy, car enthusiast. He was from Mifflinville. He passed away May 5th at age 77. He was best known as Jim. Jim was born in Berwick Hospital, graduate of Central Columbia High School class of 66. After graduation, he proudly served as yeoman first class in the U.S. Navy for 22 years. After retiring from the Navy, James obtained a bachelor's degree in automotive technology at Pennsylvania College of Technology. He was a mechanic for many years, a car enthusiast. Classic cars were his passion, especially his 1968 Hemi Roadrunner. He was a member of the Northeast Hemi Roadrunners or Homeowners Hemi Owners Association. Involved with the Mifflinville Parade Committee. He marched and spoke at that Mifflinville Memorial Parade for many years. He grew up as a member of the Mifflinville United Methodist Church. Surviving are his 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and a number of other family members. Sadly, his beloved wife of 41 years, Deborah, passed away in 2018. James Shellhammer. Timothy Boland. We lost him May 15th. He was living in Doylestown at the time, 1 month shy of his 101st birthday. A longtime resident of Cunningham, he was born in Dunmore back in 1924. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy after the start of World War II. His first ship, the USS Swerve, was sunk off the coast of Anzio, Italy in 1944. He later served us in the Philippines, Okinawa, and the occupation of Japan. After the war, Tim attended Catholic University of America on a GI Bill to graduating with a degree in electrical engineering. He started working with the Department of the Navy, but then became a manager at the Pennsylvania Power and Light Company in Hazleton, PA, where he remained for over 38 years until his retirement in 1990. He was married to his wife, Evelyn, for 67 years until her passing in April of 2020. He and Evie were the founding family of the new St. John Bosco Church way back when. Involved with the United Way, the Mincy Trails Council of Boy Scouts. Particularly proud of his multiple terms he spent on the Cunningham Borough Council, the last 2 as president. He also was active with Meals on Wheels for 20 years. Traveled with Evie, Europe, Asia. Survived by 5 sons and their families. Tim is also survived by 16 grandchildren, 9 great-grandchildren, even though he was predeceased by his wife, Evie. 101-year-old Timothy Boland. Our great veterans this hour, brought to you by our man John Basiliga, Eastern Roofing Systems in Jessup, and Serenity Care. Storm Tracker 16 forecast For meteorologist Joe Snedeker today, partly sunny and muggy with a chance of thunderstorms, 83 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy, low 65. Wednesday, partly sunny and less humid, 85. Thursday, partly cloudy with a chance of showers and thunderstorms, 85 degrees. So, our Ricardo Jewelers watch store time is 11:38. And two things. One, Murph's son he works up at Lakeland. His son Matt works up at Lakeland Orchards. And they've got this whole weekend 50% off ticket price for hometown heroes, meaning our veterans, and their families this weekend. All armed services, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs. And guess what? You get to see Matt Murphy up there. So 50% off, pretty good deal and important. All armed services, law enforcement, firefighters, and EMTs at Lakeland Orchard. And I've heard nothing but great stuff about all of that. All right. And also, happy heavenly birthday to Mary Regina's mom, Antoinette Tony Perry. And God bless her. I knew her well. I know, it's funny. I'd ask her first name. You know, when I grew up, you knew them as Mrs. Perry, Mr. Perry. That's all you knew. If you found out their first name, it was by accident. And Tommy P's on patrol on South Apple and Dunmore, so everybody's safe up there. That we know. Let's go to Bill from Pittston on the Battle of Wyoming. He's got his theme song. That's your choice?
Either that or Scared in the Sky.
All right, Bill, what do you got? You've got some thoughts on the Battle of Wyoming.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with the Battle of Wyoming. I went to the Historical Society and got a couple books when I was younger, and that was great that you had Dave DeCosmo and Bill Lewis on. Yeah, there's a number of places that were named after the Wyoming Massacre, not just the state of Wyoming. But the Battle of Wyoming was preceded by the Pennamite Wars that carried on even through after the Revolutionary War. Connecticut had claimed that this was their territory, and then you had the Quakers from Philadelphia that they got into a shooting feud right before the Revolutionary War. They had quite a few skirmishes. So that stuff fascinates. Even Queen Esther's Rock, and that's about what it is now from everybody chipping away at it, but it's still worth seeing.
Neat stuff. And a bunch of people texting in about this. They didn't know there was somebody texted in. They didn't know there was a Monument Street down in Wyoming. And somebody said, all right, Bob, the Wyoming Monument is on the corner of Wyoming Avenue and Susquehanna Avenue in Wyoming. It has no official number address, but the address of the big house across the street is 700 Wyoming Avenue. So that's good to know.
You can't miss it.
Yeah.
I've
driven by it 100 times and had no idea the history behind it. That is incredible. It's great.
They even have tours of the Battle of Wyoming now. I think there's one in June. The July one's coming up, but there's one in September. Tony, what's his name? Anyway, they do. It's like a ghost tour. One guy tells the history, the other guy tells the ghost stories. But yeah, that's what I really appreciate you. Dave DeCosmo is always great to hear from, and that Bill Lewis, it really made me.
I felt like I could have asked Bill Lewis, and between the two of them, I could have asked them anything, and I would have gotten a complete answer to my question. I was like, wow, we've got to, and I even texted David. So we've got to do this with Bill Lewis again.
Well, you're on top of your game again. You know, I mean, I'm going to go to that event. I can't wait to go. And like I said, I grew up on Wyoming Street in Wilkes-Barre, and that's my home was the farm of Frances Slocum. And there's a little park there, and there's a stone there commemorating where she was kidnapped. So I've always been fascinated with the history and John Sullivan's March, where he practically eradicated the Indian villages and stuff like that. So thanks again.
Is that the
you're
same
really,
guy, Route 6, Sullivan's Trail?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to drive that. I was running for Congress in '88, and I said I would notice the markers, Sullivan's Trail.
Yep.
And that's how Sullivan's Trail was the original Route 6. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. He burned everything to the ground for the Indians. And so, yeah, but anyway, thanks again, Bob.
Always a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. And thank you again for great programming. Thank you.
And there's the theme song. I don't associate you with crazy, but I'll go with it. All right, thanks,
well, you
Bill.
can change it to Spirit of the Sky if you like that better.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Bill from Pittston. Hey, somebody said thank you for doing the acknowledgement of the Battle of Wyoming. So a number of you asked, where do you park? No idea. I apologize. I just don't have any idea. Somebody else, LTS, Bob, loved hearing about our area's history that unfortunately most people don't know anymore. We don't, you know. You can actually still see the Bloody Rock, a.k.a. Queen Esther's Rock, located just off East 8th Street on Susquehanna Avenue. Neat stuff. That's amazing stuff. I don't know if I read this already, but they said, Bob, thank you. I didn't know there's a Monument Street there. Go figure. Yeah. Now, on a separate subject, Chief Capoose. Is it Capoose or Capouse? Because we've got a Capouse Street in Scranton. And he said he was from Weston Field, and there was an Indian village there. There's a plaque there in his remembrance. And somebody's going to ask David to do a history check on Chief Capoose. Is it Capoose or Capouse? Capoose sounds more like an Indian name, by the way. Cabinet guy says definitely something to see, great local history. Well, I'm going to make a point of it. I'm going to make a point of seeing this stuff. It's fascinating. It's important, too. It's really important. By the way, on my monitor, I'm watching Donald Trump along with Kristi Noem and Governor Ron DeSantis and a number of other officials looking at Alligator Alcatraz for the illegals. I'm telling you, the guy's funny. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And they are here illegally, and the people they're going to put there, the majority of them are criminals in addition to breaking our law and coming in. So, no, I don't have any sympathy for them. Treat them humanely and get them the hell out. We'll take a break. Bob Cordaro, WILK. We will return. Murph says this date, 1973, the Cornelius Brothers and Sister Rose. I'm guessing they're performing together. They moved up to number 5 with their hit, It's Too Late to Turn Back Now. By the way, I have my Camp Freedom XL, I might point out, not double XL, XL shirt on today. And we're going to be doing an event up there, I believe, July 11th. Yeah, July 11th, we're going to do our show from up there at Camp Freedom. I'm ecstatic about it. Guys went up and checked it out, Bill and Zach. And so we'll be up there on the 11th of July on a Friday. Well, it's next Friday, the Friday after this one. Amazing. Somebody wants to know what block of Wyoming Avenue in Wyoming is it taking place. As best we can calculate, the 700 block. We're finishing with Joe Walsh. Murph tells us this date, 78. He was moving up the charts with his hit, Life's Been Good. So that's how we'll finish. Lorraine called in. She was on hold, and I didn't get to her, and so we didn't get her poem. So we lost out on that. Hopefully tomorrow we'll get to do it. Bob, I haven't heard how much pork is in the big, beautiful bill to get the pet projects of Congress passed from Peter Fitzwell. Billions of pork and everybody's little pet whatever. We can't solve this spending problem. We've got to grow our way out of it. That's the reality. That's why tax rates have to be low, regulations have to be low, and energy has to be cheap. Otherwise, we will not grow enough to grow out of this mess. Somebody said recovery of bones from the pit, which we were talking about in Battle of Wyoming, reminds me of Bosnia-Herzegovina, 2002. While I was with the Pennsylvania National Guard, I witnessed the recovery of bones from a mass grave. Terrible sight, says Army Trucker. Wow. Must be an amazing sight, though, huh? Somebody asked, will the crypt be home to view? I don't know any of that. I'm not sure of any of that. But how about our Army Trucker guy? Fascinating. Let's see. Oh, so Mark Payne. Now, he's Mr. Scranton. He really is. He's running for council there, too. I urge you to vote for him. He says it's Kapouse. The street was named after the Kapouse Indians that inhabited what is now Pine Brook section of Scranton. He learned that from Mr. Kelly. Oh, the great Mr. Kelly, whose son Chris just died. One of my great friends. Just a good guy. Great musician. Yeah, Mr. Kelly. And Mr. Kelly was one of my favorites at Dunmore High School. So thank you for that. It is Kapouse. Good. Not Chief Capoose, Chief Kapouse. Even though Capoose sounds strangely more Indian. Huh. So that's our deal. Razor said it's going to take a ton of work to turn this Titanic around, but Trump has started. Everything is not perfect, but he did start. I'm with you. I agree 100%. Bob, 4th of July is my wife Jane and my 39th anniversary. Best thing that ever happened to me, says our guy Rodney. How about that? Happy anniversary, guys. Love it. Somebody saying where the event is occurring, cabinet guy says, just past the Price Chopper. Let's see. Somebody was talking about the Battle of Wyoming. I want to finish with that. Good morning, Bob Cordaro. I was talking to a gentleman I worked with a few minutes ago about the Battle of Wyoming. He said there's a cemetery on the other side of the river across from Exeter. It's called Ransom Township. There's a cemetery back to the cornfield by the railroad tracks that has a plaque that says the Battle of Wyoming. And suggest I pass that information on to our guys. We didn't have a chance to talk about everything we could. And by the way, LTS back at you. Well, it is 12 o'clock, according to my Bacardo's watch. That means I got to go. There's nothing I can do about it. So I will go. Sue Henry Show next. Rob O'Donnell Show after that. Guys, have a great afternoon. God willing, I'll be with you tomorrow morning. But for now, we've got to gavel to a close this meeting of the Club for Common Sense. Thanking our veterans real quick one more time. Robert Polster, South Abington Township. Richard Capwell, Dixon City. Joseph Justick, Suskin. John Kempka, Wilkes-Barre. Timothy Boland. He was from Doylestown when he passed, but this 101-year-old man lived most of his life in Cunningham. He was born in Dunmore. And James Shellhammer, Mifflinville. Thank you to them. Thank you to their families. You made America great. Have a good one, guys. Adios.